everybody, this is Steve Moretti, and you're listening to Break It Down Show. I'm really happy to be here.
All right. Well, we're really happy to have you. For our listeners, Steve Moretti is a world-class drummer who is originally from Pete's hometown and my new adopted hometown of Benicia, California. He now lives in Macon, Georgia, but he plays all around the world with a bevy of artists and is doing symphonic drum set work too, which I find fascinating. But you are joining us with Steve for the first time, and we're really, really elated to have you, man. We've had some good drummers on the show. I'm happy to report.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But boy, you're taking the cake. So let's see. And I'm sure that some of the drummers we've had on the show before, it seems like you probably have crossed paths at least with artists that you work together mutually or whatever. But where did it all begin? You grew up in Benicia. I didn't know you when you were here, but Pete did.
Yeah.
Is that true, Pete?
Well, yeah, I guess, right, Pete?
Well, he was a younger dude, so I knew he existed, and I knew his older brother, Vinny. But it wasn't that I didn't know him. It just we had no reason to know each other, really,
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah, so I guess where it all began, well, my brother, who's 6 years older than me, got a drum set for his 10th birthday. So before we moved to Benicia, we lived in New Jersey, which is where I was born. And so he got a drum set for his birthday, and I remember just watching him play all day. And the next morning, I woke up and started playing what he was playing, and my mom thought it was him. And it was me. So, it just kind of started from there. And then the great thing about Benicia is there were really good, schools. The Benicia Middle School and the high school had really good music programs. So I was fortunate to Miss Kuklis and Mr. Williams were very instrumental. Yes, the pun intended, instrumental into the development of me as a musician. I don't think I would be as good of a musician as I am without them pushing me. So I'm very grateful for that.
That's great to hear, but it doesn't stop there. What happened next? I mean, you don't go from there to world class in one quick leap. So what else were you doing?
Well, so at that point, and then I was starting to play and do a lot of different things. And the one thing I loved about the music programs is I was able to stretch myself musically and perform in a variety of musical situations, right? So we had jazz band, we had symphonic band, we had marching band. And of course, I was playing to a variety of different types of CDs and recordings. Then I went on to college. I got my undergraduate degree from the University of Redlands, which is east of LA. And again, that was another wonderful opportunity where I was able to spread and stretch my wings as a musician. And I was involved in a plethora of musical situations and got into the studio world recording. And then I went back up to the Bay Area. I got my master's at Cal State Hayward. Dave Eshelman was the jazz director there. And in like my halfway through my graduate studies, I won an audition actually that changed my career. I was gigging around the Bay Area and teaching and doing some different things, but it was an audition that Concord Records, which at the time was based in Concord.
Yeah.
They are now in LA or Beverly Hills, but so they were looking for a band that would eventually become Rosemary Clooney's band. And for those of you who don't know Rosemary Clooney, her nephew is kind of a dude who's pretty popular by the name of George Clooney. And
boy, how the tables have turned.
Right. Yes. Rosemary Clooney, of course, was in the White Christmas, famous movie with Bing Crosby, but she was an amazing jazz singer. So I was her drummer for the last 4 or 5 years of her life. And so that band had its own project, and then we became Rosemary Clooney's band, among other people. And then you mentioned the symphonic drumming, which was not on my radar. The guy that I have been drumming with now for 22 years, his name is Matt Kattengoob, who was the person that did the audition. For those of you in the music industry, we played Matt Kattengoob charts in high school and college. His big band charts were, if you had a good band, you could hang with his charts because he wrote some really difficult stuff. So it was kind of neat to get to work with him. And then he was also a symphonic pops conductor. And so he recommended me for a show with Toni Tennille from Captain and Tennille. So she would do symphony shows, but it was a big band kind of torch stuff. It wasn't like Captain and Tennille stuff, but he was her music director for Captain and Tennille for many years. And so it just sort of snowballed. So I started playing with her, and then those symphony orchestras would reach out to me. Hey, you know how to play with an orchestra. we have another artist coming in. Can you come and play drums? And so they would fly me in, and it just sort of started kind of snowballing. And here I'm, not right now, of course, but I'm still doing that.
Yeah. Well, if our listeners care to get more detail about you when we're done here, they can always get you at Steve Moretti. Let's see, what's the name of your website? It's stevemoretti.com, right?
It's
Pretty
right there on
basic.
the screen. Steve Moretti.
Simple as that. Oh, there it is.
Oh,
Right on.
get everything. Look at how awesome this is. It's right here.
Hey, I want to ask you a little bit because, okay, so John and I are big brothers with similar gaps between us and our younger brothers, right? And I try to say younger brother and older brother because my brother said, stop calling me your little brother. And I'm like, got it. And that was 20 years ago, and I still get it wrong sometimes. But your brother, Vinny, we have to mention him because he's such a character. He fills up the room. I put the announcement on the Benicia pages like saying, hey, Steve's going to be on the show. And he was a drummer, and it's such a charismatic guy. How did that shape who you were as you grew up? Like, did you my damn brother's like my brother gets it like, oh, you're Pete's brother, like before they say his name, and he's made his own way and everything, but he gets a lot of that. How did that go for you growing up?
I was always known as Mini Vinny. That's what people would call me because we actually looked a lot alike when I was younger.
Yeah.
And then there was a time when I was, probably early high school. People thought I was the older brother. Sadly, they thought I was older looking than him. Fortunately, that's changed. I'm still younger looking. Thank you very much.
But back then you could buy beer.
Exactly. No, don't do that, kids. No. But yes, it was. He does have a larger than life personality, and especially we both played soccer. And I actually carried his number. He was number 26. And so I kept that number when I played soccer for Benicia High School. And, but, in musically, we kind of went our own paths. He didn't pursue it necessarily for a career. He's a very successful entrepreneur, and he had several businesses, including the Benicia Home Improvement, which was one of his early businesses. And now he's got his own company that reps high-end cabinets, but he still played and he was in bands. In fact, when I was in college, we had a band together that I would try to come up and play with as much as I could. So I was drumming and he was the lead singer actually, because he's got a really good voice. But we just kind of, I hate to say it, but I started surpassing him pretty early on as a drummer. Don't get mad, Vinny, but
yeah.
And just because I was laser focused, and I knew what I wanted to do and put the hard work and shedded and really tried to push myself musically. But we were always very supportive, and it was kind of fun when I was in college, getting to play some shows with him as the lead singer. We sound good together singing harmonies because our voices are very similar. So that was kind of fun. And it's neat to see him now still. I think he still plays in his church. He'll play either drums or he's playing bass now too, and he can play guitar. So he still keeps the music going. And my nephew is also kind of dabbling a little bit in music for fun. And so there's definitely some lineage there in the gene pool.
So as you're coming up, you do hit that other gear, right? Vinny's a good drummer. He's in band, but he's also, got a lot of other things he's doing. When did you start to recognize that? And when was it the musical education in a traditional university? By the way, fellow pioneer, go Cal State, Hayward / East Bay. But that's a dedicated path. Why did you go that route? Legitimate, but why not go gig it up and go up and down Sunset and break it out that way? I mean, you have the chops. What made you go the school route?
It was kind of a little bit of both. I had a scholarship to another university, Eastman School of Music, and I also played tuba at the time. So I had a scholarship on tuba and percussion. But when I went to Eastman at the time, I couldn't take jazz as an undergraduate, and that was kind of a deterrent for me. And my mom, long story short about Redlands, I got introduced to Redlands. I'd never heard of them before, but when I was playing timpani in the California State Honor Orchestra, they sort of courted me. And my mom said one day, let's just fly down and check it out. Worst case, if you don't like it, you go to Eastman. And I remember just falling in love. And then the wheels started turning about, I'm close to LA. There's a lot of opportunities here. So, it'll give me a chance to hone in on my craft and continue to get better and get more versatile. I always knew that being versatile as any rhythm section player, you're going to open up more opportunities for revenue. And I knew I didn't want to be an orchestral musician at that time. Like I didn't want to be a symphonic musician. I still loved classical music and wanted to still sub and perform and do that. But I knew drum set was where I wanted to stay focused. And so early on, I did get opportunities to gig in LA. In fact, my second semester of my freshman year, there was a gentleman who was an amazing trumpet player. His name is Jack Poster. And he was in his 40s at the time, came back to Redlands to get his degrees. And he's since went on and got a doctorate. But he was like one of these top lead players in Las Vegas. And one of these guys that can play in the stratosphere all night long and get tired. And he was playing with a band, a big band in Pasadena called the Ashley Williams Orchestra. And I remember he recommended me to play with them. And it was one of these gigs where you show up. I was by far the youngest person on stage. And the book was about this thick.
Wow.
And it was one of these things where, okay, number 362, pull it up. 1, 2, 1, sight read. Holy crap. And it was just like, oh, sorry. I must have done something there. It was like one of these things. I got excited. It's one of these things that was like your feet are to the fire right away. And, that opportunity, being exposed to something like that with such high quality people really ups. I don't know. Sorry, everybody. Good Lord. Really ups your game, and it forced me to, test my skills. And so I was very lucky to have some of those opportunities. And then, recommendations that kind of kept coming in from there, for other studio work and other opportunities. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. And I was teaching through the community school in Redlands as well, and playing in the Redlands Symphony and doing some, the jazz band and the combo and the wind ensemble and singing in the choir. So again, I just really pushed myself, which fortunately now, as I look back, and it wasn't on my mind at that time, but it's really helped me as a producer. Having all of those experiences has helped me, I think, become a better producer, just because of having that breadth of musical knowledge.
Yeah, that sounds great. How important has, for that gig, of course, being able to open the book and read was essential. But how important has reading been for you as a creator, as a producer? I mean, do you ever just, like Quincy Jones, open up the staff paper and grab a pencil and score something with a pen and paper, as opposed to banging things out?
Sometimes with arrangements, I'll do arrangements. I'm not really composing as much as I'd like to. Sometimes I'll work with singers, artists that I'm producing, and I'll co-write songs with them. But whenever I do string arrangements, I'm old school. I sit down at the piano and I'll kind of, Arm and I start writing it out by hand, and then I'll convert it into print for them. But the reading was paramount, because today when I show up to a symphony gig, when I'm playing a pop show, 99.9% of the times I've never seen the charts, so I'm reading them at rehearsal. And so being able to play it like you've played these charts your whole life is something that that skill, and that starts with middle school with Miss Kuklis and Dot Williams, reading a lot of charts and getting comfortable with sight reading. That was probably one of the most important skills that I've been able to take away and that I use all the time.
Well, and for the guys who are playing in rock bands, Greg Bissonette, he always has a Sharpie with him. And if it's just scribbling the intro on the drum head, just so he doesn't lose the intro, he's gotten gigs just because he scribbled out that one part that everybody else would screw up.
Yep, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And now with technology, I'll take my iPad with me, and I have some staff, like a program where I could hammer out like a quick chart, at least a rough, roadmap if I need to remind myself if I'm playing an original song with somebody. But fortunately, with like a lot of like a Greg Bissonette and all these people, I've been able to, I hear something and I can pretty much lock it in pretty quickly. So that's been a good skill. I'll remember a lot of the musical elements of a song by maybe hearing it once or twice. And that all started too with, my brother, when he really started getting into the drums, he was playing along the Rush recordings.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I
of course.
remember just second grade playing the whole Exit Stage Left album, including the solo and everything. But just getting used to listening and learning a song quickly, that was another skill that I still use today. Because a lot of times if I'm playing with an artist, especially if it's original material, actually, it was one of my first performances since COVID, just a local thing here. There was a local singer, songwriter, producer by the name of James Worsham, a real talented guy. And, he's had some of his original songs, and, you hear the song and get it in my head, and then I'm able to sort of play it without kind of wasting any time. So listening and reading are crucial, I think, for a successful career.
Well, we had Rick Marotta on the show, and
nice.
We asked him about sight reading, and he said, he was talking about the Oscars gig. I said, can you read to that gig? And he said, I can read well enough to get fired from that gig. But he had also told us that he was recently hired to play something for somebody where they had written the part all out for him. And after he played it, he said, I'm glad you guys got me, but I don't know why you got me. You could have gotten anybody to do this. Typically people hire Rick Marotta because they want something that sounds like Rick Marotta. Right. So as far as your symphonic playing, we know that reading is essential and that charts are present for everybody. But when you're gigging with other people, you've played with Michael McDonald and Kenny Loggins. By the time you get there, you're not just executing the part. You have to play because they like your feel. So let's talk about that for a minute. Well, if they don't, they get somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like I try to, and it's something I think as drummers, we really try to work hard to develop our own sound, right? Like I hear one of my all-time favorite drummers, Gary Novak, for example. I hear two notes and I know it's Gary Novak. I know his sound. He's been an incredible inspiration, but I don't want to sound like Gary Novak because that's Gary Novak. But there are elements we all take from our inspirations and try to put it to our own voice. And so hopefully people are hiring me because they like my sound. They like the way I'm approaching things musically. Playing with Michael McDonald, there's certain groove elements, obviously, that you're playing, but hopefully he likes the way I'm doing stuff with the music, sort of my interpretation to enhance the music without getting in the way. And that's the other thing. I think a lot of times, you have some of these drummers out there that can do more with one hand than I can do with my entire body, but they can't play music. And I think that's the key, is being, you're an extension of an ensemble. Yeah, you're sometimes the heartbeat, you and the bass player, but if you're not there, especially if you're playing original material, for example, like what Michael McDonald, you're not there to show off. You're there to lay a foundation and try to enhance the music without getting in the way. And you see these guys, they're throwing these crazy fills every 2 bars that don't make sense in the musical phrase. And again, they've got incredible chops doing all the visual crap. I'm not into the visual gymnastics. That's just not my thing. For me, I try to speak just through the music. Even if it's something really simple that I'm playing, I try to put every ounce of my being into those. If it's a 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 and 8th notes, it's going to get every ounce of feeling into those. And that was kind of the cool thing playing with Michael McDonald, because he was probably 4 feet from me, with his at the piano, and I remember when he counted off, I keep forgetting, and it was a little kind of slower, but it just had the nastiest, easiest feel, and it was just one of these things like, how could you not just slop yourself up in all that grease? And then just hearing him play, it was such an inspiration, because I could feel what he was doing, the way he was kicking it off, and it was like, all right, this is where
we're going in.
Look at that face.
I was like, it was sneaky. You just can't help it. And it was just so funky. And so again, I try to just be me. And some people may like my playing and some people may not. That's just the way the world is. And as creative egotistical people we are, we have to get over the fact that not everyone's going to like what you do. You just have to stay true to who you are and do the best you can.
And do things you like, because you clearly like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's why music
all night long.
Yeah, that's why live music is so important, because from night to night, an artist who has played a song for 30 years is going to interpret it differently tonight. It's going to be a little different. It's going to, we're going to drag it out and we're going to make it just greasy. And, those things happen because of the magic of the live environment.
Yeah.
When did you play with Michael McDonald? How long ago was that?
That was I did a couple of concerts with him, actually with the Honolulu Symphony. So it was a Pops gig. And so they brought me in for that. And I was living in Florida at the time, I think. So that would have been 2000.
He made the decision to funk up I Keep Forgetting in Symphony gig.
Oh man, it was so amazing.
Magic.
And then and then I remember, we had actually 2 days of rehearsal, which is kind of a luxury because normally it's a single rehearsal. And so I was working on my mix, with my in-ears. And I remember I had 2 full days to just dial everything in. And I had some nice reverb on his voice. It sounded like a record in my head. And I remember this one song, it was just him and strings. And I just remember sitting there, closing my eyes. I'm like, I have Michael McDonald in my head and he's right there. And it was like his voice just in my brain. And it was one of the most incredible experiences that I've ever had musically. Just his voice, just live. It's ridiculous. He's an amazing man. Really.
Yeah. Wow.
I want to talk about Michael McDonald, but I also want to go back for a second too and talk about, so, you call yourself a percussionist, which I guess technically all drummers are, but you're a drummer and percussionist. You're playing the timpani, you're playing in jazz ensembles, you played in bands. I mean, you're not a slave to any one particular thing. Is that at your level, like a professional drummer who's always going to have work? Is that common or is that by design for you because you like to do a lot of different things?
I think most people that I've seen, they sort of kind of have their niche that they want to focus on. For me, I just knew because I guess since I can't sit still, I wanted to be able to do as much as I could musically because I love it all. That's also the thing. I love playing. I've done some recordings with the Atlanta Symphony playing in the percussion section. And I made the joke to the former principal percussionist who's actually now in the Cleveland Orchestra now. I said, you must be at the bottom of the barrel of your sublet to call me to come up and do two records with you guys. That was sort of the joke, be a little self-deprecation, but it's challenging. And I love that challenge. I love being under pressure when I have to perform or produce or whatever. I feel that ignites things that I don't know I can do, in other words. And that's the beautiful thing about music. I think you can, you're never complacent. And for me, I have a little game with myself. If the day I think I'm good, then I'm going to stop playing, to be honest. And
oh boy,
I love orchestral music, whether it's symphony or opera or whatever. And one of the things I do is I watch the percussion section because I'm fascinated by like the person who has, let's say, 15 notes throughout the entire 2 hours, like they pick up the triangle and they're ready like measures and measures before because,
if you miss it's obvious.
They're counting 168 measure rest.
Yeah. And they get ready and you're like, oh, it's coming. It's coming.
You don't miss that.
And then they're like, ding. And then they let it ring and put it down. And I'm like, now what?
Right.
But it's and I don't want to at all diminish the job because there has to be someone dedicated to that. But it is the one kind of music where really one person can stand there and do the least amount of work. But when you ring that triangle, everybody knows it's there, or the gong or whatever piece of percussion they do. What is that like for someone to have to do that, to be that disciplined, to count every measure, to be in the whole thing, but only have to do these very few things?
Well, it's a little stressful, and there's part of it that's stressful because if you lose count now, generally you kind of make some markings in the measures. So so you don't have to necessarily count. So you may say, okay, the flute's coming here. Okay, well, this is where the flutes are. Okay, so I'm here now. So sometimes you make little notes in different sections to, French horns come in here, so you're not counting a consistent amount. And a lot of times after you've rehearsed, generally with the classical concerts, there's 4 to 5 rehearsals before the first concert. So and if you study the piece, you'll kind of know where things are. But there's the part of it that's stressful, because if you think in your head and you start second guessing, you're like, oh crap. Oh, wait, am I here?
Yeah, it's a miscalculation to think it's less work.
It's not.
It's not less work.
No. And there's a certain technique to making a triangle sound good, believe it or not. There's different types of triangles, there's different types of beaters. It depends what type of sound the composer or the conductor wants, or the principal percussion. And, so there's a lot of elements to that. And then there's some pieces, obviously, that you play that are super busy. The percussion section's all over the place. And then there's some where, like the Scheherazade is a famous piece. There's a huge concertmaster solo, and there's a ginormous triangle part toward the end, especially. And, or like pictures at an exhibition, there's some odd bars, odd time things where, it's just triangle. But see, if you know how to use your ear, you'll know sometimes where the triangle is supposed to fit. Am I playing with the upper woodwinds, or am I with, these people? And so that's something I think having a good musical ear helps you, get through that, and also hopefully helps you play it better.
I identify as a funk drummer, but I have guilty pleasures. Like, when you talk about orchestral music, I used to love in high school Christmas season, because I loved playing concert band, the Christmas songs, the sleigh bells and the whip crack and all of that stuff. I really got a kick out of that. What is a guilty pleasure now that you have where you think, this of my body of work is probably the corniest thing from which I derive the most pleasure?
That's a tough one. I don't know if it's necessarily a guilty pleasure, but I miss playing timpani. I don't get to play it that much anymore, and I really enjoy playing it. So the chance I can get to play, I really enjoy it. But I'm actually, there's some Christmas concerts coming up. One with my group here, Macon Pops, that I co-founded with Matt Kettengoob. Actually, we're in our 8th season, and we do this concert. We actually do the music for this. It's a Christmas called the Christmas Light Extravaganza. And this guy in town who's a business owner and just a community advocate had this idea of doing a whole Christmas light display downtown. And about 6 years ago, I said, hey, man, why don't we do the music for it? I said, you could put canned Christmas music and it would be fine. But why don't we do it? We'll do custom arrangements. We'll feature local talent on it. And Macon has a very rich music history. For those of you who don't know, Otis Redding, Little Richard, the Allman Brothers, Capricorn Studios, Capricorn Records. Now the Capricorn Studios, as a sidebar, is now up and running thanks to Mercer University. It's back up. You can Google it. And my office actually is upstairs from there for Macon Pops. But so we have, about 7-8 different local singers that Matt did the custom arrangements for. We've got a CD. If you go to maconpops.com, you can listen to some of the CD. And in fact, there's an original song we put together last year called Heading South for the Winter that you can download for free. But it's the cool thing that nobody's doing from what I've seen. So there's over 500,000 lights down 4.5 city blocks. And so we got a grant, this is our 3rd year doing it, to kick off the light show, because it runs for about a month. It'll run to the first Saturday in January. And it's like Disneyland, so Matt and I do all of our voiceovers and read all the sponsors and all that stuff. And so the lights come out on the street, and then the 6 o'clock show starts. There's the 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock show. But we kick it off with this live concert synchronized to 500,000 lights live. And it's it's pretty amazing. So that's kind of fun to do. And it's this year, we're not doing it with a full 40-piece orchestra. We're only going to have our big band do it so we can spread it out on stage. And everyone's going to have, we've been meeting with the EMA in town, and it's all mask mandated, and we have hand sanitizing stations and certain entrance and exit points and all the things we could do to mitigate any potential harm to people. But I'm also doing a Christmas concert over at Lake Oconee, and it's sort of one of those things where I'll be playing a bunch of sleigh bells and a bunch of percussion stuff with the drum set. I'm kind of handling everything, glockenspiel, and so I'm going to be a one-man band at that point in time. So that'll be kind of fun. So that's kind of a guilty pleasure.
So my guilty pleasure was playing the whip crack at the beginning of Sleigh Ride, and yours is synchronizing synchronizing your score to 500,000 lights during a pandemic. Okay, all right, okay, point taken. I have a heart out, so I got to run. But before I do that, I just want to say, let's definitely stay in touch.
Yeah,
and
this is really awesome, man.
I want our listeners to go find on Steve's website, the Drum Rider. Now, somewhere in the layers of Steve's website, you can download Steve's Drum Rider. Everybody knows about artist riders. You know, Mariah Carey needs Avion water with bubbles in it or whatever. Steve's is completely technical. It's the setup that he needs wherever he's playing. And it is a couple of things. I want people to look at it because of the level of detail, but it is a very, it's a very, I would say arguably modest drum rider. Your requirements are few and simple, but I would like for our readers our listeners to go check it out, because this is just one of those pro level things that exists, and everybody's got one. Yours just happens to be on your website, so everybody should go find it, check it out, look at the list. It's great, and it says a lot about you that that you don't need much to rock the house.
Well, thank you. So, you know, depending on who it is, I'm going to send a separate. Golly, sorry about that. What's going on here? Anyway, I might send a separate email. I need my M&M separated by color, and
right.
Especially for the symphony orchestra, so they can, you know, if they have any questions, they can pull up the writer. And obviously, being a Perl artist, that's who I prefer to use. Sometimes if they can't get a Perl, I give them, you know, 3 other choices. As long as decent and I bring my cymbals, we're fine.
Yeah. And I love that you play a 10 on the rack and a 14 and a 16 on the floor, because the 10s always ring, man. A 12 has problems. 10s always ring.
Unless I'm playing like a country show or something that's real older sounding, maybe I might throw a 12 up there. But the 10's nice because it's versatile, and you know, you can do a lot with it.
Yeah. Anyway, you guys, I'm out. Steve, take care.
Right. Well,
see you soon.
Thanks, man. It was great to chat with you.
From John. Yeah, so I want to get back into when you produce these things, you have to submit a program. Like Macon is not a big town, you know, 150,000 people, probably another 50 around the area that you guys can draw from. When you submit something like this and you've written the music and, you know, you've got everything done, how confident are you that the community is going to support it to the point, like with grants and that kind of thing? I mean, it's one thing to create something. It's another thing to get people to say, yes, we're going to pay you for the time. Yes, this is valuable, you know, to the community in general. How is that process? Because that's a whole nother professional skill, I think.
It is. And it's a nonprofit organization. So that's a whole other, you know, if you told me 15 years ago I'd be running my own profit, I'd say you couldn't pay me enough, and I don't get paid really to run it. So there you go. But it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And, you know, I couldn't be more proud of the product that we put out there. You know, our concerts, our slogan is Macon Pops is not just a concert, it's an event. And our concerts are an experience. It's, you know, it's like a hip nightclub with a 40-piece orchestra, basically. And now we've kind of changed our performances. We have, you know, one that is inside this arena where we have 70, 80 tables of 10 people and a giant dance floor in the middle, and then our big stage. And then we do one at the Grand Opera House, which is more of a, you know, I would say a traditional kind of concert experience where you're in a theater, but we still add a whole layer of production. We have live video imaging, you know, really high quality sound. And of course, the shows that we do, the arrangements are, you know, we've done everything from celebrating the music of James Bond to, you know, R&B, hip hop, gospel, soul show. We've done country. We've done, we did a whole Macon Pops that goes back to our roots. And we celebrated Macon's music heritage. So it's a whole Southern rock thing. And these are shows that are handcrafted, and it's because of Matt's musical genius that we can do this. But with a lot of the orchestras that I go and tour with, you know, the quality and the experience, nobody compares to what we do. And we're, like I said, we're coming to our 8th season. And I think, the community, we've been able to draw so many aspects of our community together. Music is always that common thread that does that. And so I think we've been able to garner that support. We have corporate sponsors, individual patrons, and then we have some grants. Grants are like the icing on the cake because they take some time. You apply for a grant and then you've got about a 6-month waiting period to see whether you get it or not. So I don't depend on grants for my budget. And that's the other thing. When you're running a nonprofit, you've got all that whole business aspect to deal with. And that's a separate conversation. But being around the symphony world, and my wife, who's in the orchestra business for many, many, many years as a concertmaster, I know how nonprofits work. And I've started a couple of nonprofits in the past that I've handed off to people. Actually, one is still going in Oregon called, what is it called? Oh my gosh. Summer. It's a summer music. Golly, I can't remember the name. Anyway, it's still going, but that's a whole other ball of wax. But I think because of the audience, like you mentioned, we're about 100 and Macon itself is maybe about 120, 130,000 people. So we average when we've crunched the numbers, about 1,100 people a concert. That's our average. And that's pretty darn good for a local town. Yeah. Now, which we're not going to have this year, but last year at the Christmas show, it 25,000 people down the street. It was crazy.
Oh man, that's incredible.
We were joking. Yeah. It felt like a Hallmark movie. It's like it just looked like it. So I think because we're trying to do some good for the community, bringing people together. We also have an education initiative that we're working on really expanding, where we will actually have a footprint into our local schools throughout the year. What we've done is we've invited kids from the variety of schools, both private and public, to our rehearsals, because our musicians don't get the music in advance, basically. So they will show up about an hour before the rehearsal, look at their stuff, and we do our rehearsal, which is essentially just a show run through, right? So we're working on the music and the technical stuff. Everyone's getting their mixes, everyone's doing lighting. And so these kids get to come in, they see how we put the show together, and we do an hour Q&A with a handful of us and all of these kids, and then they come to the show for free. So they get to see behind the scenes how it works and what the finished product looks like. And but beyond that, because of our connections, we have a large Grammy presence in which I've served a couple of terms on the board of governors for the Recording Academy up in Atlanta. We've got a pipeline to some pretty important people in the music industry, and so we want to get those people to come into the community and work with kids. So that's kind of our next step, and I think the foundations and people in the community see what our intentions are, what the long-term vision is. But of course, you got to crawl before you can walk. So
you got to build the parts. Yeah. One of the big steps for our nonprofit, because I belong to one too, Save the Brave. How are we doing? Well, there are more heads to put more hats on, because you can't do it all yourself. You just can't. No. And so it sounds like you guys are really doing a bang up job. And just to illustrate this a little bit, Macon is not the capital of Georgia. It's nowhere near the size of Atlanta. And you guys have a robust, at least in terms of what you're describing, that is a robust, marketplace. You're competing with a lot of places. And again, your metro area is not that big. How rare is it to be this productive and this influential? To draw 25,000 people, you go to, maybe Hartford, Connecticut, which is the capital. That town is a third the size of where you guys are. There's no way they're driving 25,000 people to a pop show or whatever.
Right. I think it's a culmination of things. I think, of course, around the holidays, that's going to draw a lot of people. And this light show that Brian Nichols, that he put together, it's really a wonderful thing. And I think that's a huge draw in and of itself. But, we're also an integral part of that show. We're the music behind the lights. And so I think people have really come to accustom and really enjoyed seeing it. And one thing that a lot of the foundation folks have noticed, when the first time we performed live with the lights, they saw parts of Macon together in one area that they had never seen before. All right. So drawing all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicities, and so on and so forth. So, and that's something we try, like I said earlier, music is that common thread. It's something that can draw people together. And it's really important to understand the impact and the importance of the arts. In fact, a little tidbit, I think last year there was a number that was circulated within our arena through the Recording Academy, something along the effect that the entertainment industry, arts and entertainment, is a $400 billion a year business, higher than agriculture. Think about that. Okay,
that's crazy.
That's how much music and the arts. That's why it's imperative. And arts are an economic engine in communities, because if you think about a symphony orchestra, for example, you've got roughly an average of 65 to 85 full-time musicians. So there's taxes. You've got people patronizing the concerts. So you've got hundreds of people coming to concerts all the time. You've got staff that work at those venues. There's a whole trickle-down effect. With our concerts, people will go and patronize the downtown establishments before or after our concerts. And I've got 40 musicians that come from all over the place that will do the same. So we're a small economic engine that way. But beyond that, it's the community aspect of it. I think the impact that the arts have in the community, and it's unfortunate that that's sort of the first thing that people want to cut. When it comes to budgeting, that's a whole other topic. But so it's when you're asking the question, it's really knowing I know where every penny is with our organization, and I'm very fortunate that we have a wonderful board. I've got a great board chair who's been really instrumental in getting new sponsors, getting people excited about what we do and buying in, because for companies, it's a win-win for them, because they can bring some of their clients. Everyone has a great time. If they're working on some new deals, they close a deal, we get their sponsorship money, and it's a win-win. It's Macon is, to me, I find Macon is a land of opportunities. My wife, who is the director of the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings, which is what brought us to Macon 15 years ago, she's got an incredible chamber music series that she brings in world-class classical artists from all over the place. I mean, these are people you'd be spending $75, $100 to go and see in New York easily. And they work with her students, master classes and such. Wow. So, Macon's got a wonderful local music scene in terms of there's a lot of talented people. And that's what we wanted to showcase with this whole Christmas thing. And we've also made it part of our mission that throughout our season, we always feature local talent on a concert or two throughout the season. Because it's important since we have a pretty good platform now, a lot of these, and I remember I've had people come up to me like, I didn't know this person was in town. It's like, well, go down and support them at the local restaurant or coffee shop. That's what it's going to take. So people don't feel like they have to leave Macon. We're trying to bring Macon back to a music town now. Everyone's sort of focused on the history that we have, and it's a wonderful bit of history, and we need to honor that. But I feel like, hopefully Macon Pops, as we turn over that new chapter in that history book, we can be kind of the catalyst that is really propelling. And now we've got Capricorn Studios back open. So, we're trying to put all the elements in place for someone to have a successful music career being in Macon. So they can perform locally, they can record locally, and then they can, work with us, on a larger scale performance.
When you build something like this, in Macon or Benicia or whatever it's going to be, you have a small town feel for these things. You're right. Like, there are musicians out all the time, and they want to play, one, because they love to play, two, like they want to entertain a crowd. That's part of the reason why they're in it. But, you can get high-end people to play in a place like Macon or whatever it is, because it's what they do. Yes, they want to make money and big money, and they're going to get all those gigs. But in between those times, like, just, give me a couple $100 and some dinner. And next thing you know, you're like looking at someone incredible, playing. And I don't want to diminish the cost it takes to have somebody play, but you're right. That talent will go out and play, especially, like I like to say in the podcast business, like whoever it is, I'm going to ask them, I'm going to let them say no. I'm not going to say no for them,
Right.
And if they can't do it, there's no hard feelings, because we don't have a huge budget or whatever it's going to be. These are really powerful things. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on and add some flavor to is when you bring that local talent in and they get on that stage with the 65 pieces around them and they see, hundreds of people in the audience, that's likely the biggest show they've ever done. and it might be like, that was the biggest show I ever did in my career. And what a highlight, and it might also be the thing where this is where I need to laser focus. I need more of this. And you might break a career by just creating this opportunity, and then someone else sees their friend up there. Who knows what happens, right? Like, it's just not only an economic engine, but it's an opportunity engine that you guys create in little small town Macon, Georgia.
Yeah, well, and a comment I've had, we've had some of the musicians who've played with us. And in fact, because we'll try to inject an original song of theirs into a performance if we can. And I remember Matt scored something for a singer, actually two wonderful local singers. One, she's up in Nashville now, but she's coming back. Her name is Maggie Renfro, and then Josh Carson's a local guy who's singing on this original Christmas song that we put together called Heading South for the Winter. And so Matt took their original songs and arranged it for the full piece orchestra, and they were both in tears at rehearsal. They couldn't believe it, just having that sound around them. And it's also sort of helped us discover people we may want to take with us in our symphony shows, right? So if we go play with the Omaha Symphony, we're going to do show A. We know, oh, you know what? This person did a really good job. Let's bring them out, give them an opportunity, to make a pretty good paycheck and come out and do a pop show. So we're all about that too, being able to, to provide opportunities for people, because that's what it is. If we have a path to help someone's career, then, we should be, that's what it's about. You should be able to open up opportunities, because we all had opportunities open up for us. So it's paying it forward.
Yeah, you pay that forward and also pay it back a little bit. It's like, I had so many opportunities. Let me give back to this community, and do this work for free.
Right.
Like,
and that's why this Christmas concert for free. It cost a ton of money to put on, and we do have some sponsors to offset some of that. But I've had to sort of try to build it a little bit into my budget, which is, it's challenging, but we want to keep it free for the community, and it's important for that.
Give us some insight on this. I mean, look, you have there's two ways I want you to approach this: personally, and then as an advisor to people who don't know this industry like you do. You are very successful. You're accomplished. You're sponsored, and all these things. But largely, to most people, if I said, "Oh, Steve Moretti is going to be on the show," if you're not from Benicia or Macon, they may not even know who you are. And yet, you've had this long career. It's going great. So when you worry about, like, are you still trying to ascend to a bigger thing? Do you care if you're known nationally? And then the other thing is for that parent or for that kid who's like, you can't make money in music. Talk a little bit about that, because you've taken a path that is, we know, like one path, like get in a rock band, rock your balls off, make $1 zillion, go to rehab, repeat, that kind of thing. But there are so many other paths in music. I mean, you can literally go become a professor and teach timpani specifically at some school, so
and steady money,
talk a little bit about
benefits and all that. So yeah,
yes. Yeah.
For me, it was never, I never really was of the mindset that I want to be famous. That just wasn't my thing. I wanted to just be able to pay my bills playing music. That was what was most important to me. If I can sustain a career, of course, I still have aspirations. I still want to continue to grow as a musician. I still would love to, have some larger opportunities. And I've been able to do some TV and some film stuff. And you mentioned the Oscars. I got to play for the Cinematographers Guild award show, which was at the Dolby Theater up in the ballroom. And it was one of those things too, where we were sight reading at rehearsal. And it was, just having those kind of opportunities. Sure, I'd love to go on the road with John Mayer sometime, or whomever. I mean, there's, I still have goals, and I think that's what still keeps you going forward. But I always tell people that whatever instrument you play, you want to try to be as versatile stylistically as possible, because again, that opens up different revenue streams, right? So if I know I'm going to go sub with a symphony orchestra this week, I've got normally the way my schedule books out about 2 years, and things have obviously been quite different since the pandemic, but typically I would have about 2 years out of my anchor dates. So I know, okay, and I try to fill in between. So whether it's Macon Pops in between and some studio work, some production, or maybe go sub with the Atlanta Symphony or whatnot. I mean, you try to fill in those gaps, but I can't emphasize enough, being versatile and doing some teaching. When I was at Hayward, I had 10 students a month, and that paid my rent. And I was gigging, I was gigging a lot in San Francisco and in the East Bay and Black Diamond Brewery before it went away. I used to play there 3 days a month. And I played at Enrico's. I played at the Black Cat Blue Bar. I had a steady gig there, so I was making some decent money as a musician, just gigging it, around the Bay Area. But I knew I wanted to try to get on bigger stages in terms of just, larger, more prominent and opportunities musically. And so that's where I was fortunate to win an audition. But, I always tell people, if you want to be in a rock band, you want to be famous, you might as well play the lottery. Your odds are about as good.
Right.
That's not why we do this. And I think the unfortunate thing with a lot of these sort of TV shows that are out there, it sort of creates a false sense of, oh, I'm going to be on show A, B, or C, and I'm going to be famous. And if you look back, a majority of the people that have won said show, most of them aren't doing anything now, right? There's only a handful that have sustained some pretty, great careers. So, that's the mindset that needs to go away. You want to be involved in music because you love it. It's who you are, whether you're an artist and you're drawing, you're painting, and that's what you want to do, or if you're a musician or a singer or whatever. So you have to do it because you love it. And the audience can tell when you don't love it. Audiences are smart, and they can tell when you're phoning it in. And that's another thing. If I'm on stage and I'm not enjoying it, I'm going to hang it up. It's not fair. It's not fair to the audience paying good money to come and see us play. And it's not fair, for me and all the other musicians I'm working with if I'm not engaged 110%.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the future because I'm interested in how you see this. It was a time when to be a rock star ended at, let's say, 35, if you were even alive still. Dwayne Allman is dead at 22. So now you have guys like Rick Marotta, who's like, battles Lyme disease. He's no spring chicken, but he still works all the time. He didn't have to work as hard because people call him and he says yes or no, but he's working all the time. How long can a drummer, because it's such a physical job. It's one thing to play the violin where most of your body is sitting. I'm not saying it's easy, but a drummer is a different thing. Both legs moving, both arms, your neck is swinging. You're working. How long can someone do this job relatively healthy? If they're relatively healthy.
Well, I also think it depends. Something I really took a lot of thought into when I got to grad school was setup is crucial, right? So the violin, this is not normal. And so there are a lot of issues that, they have to deal with. My wife does stretches every morning. She really takes good care of her body because this is really taxing, just me doing this kills me. But drumming, I see people set up where they've got again, this visual gymnastics. They got stuff that they're doing up here and here, and this you're putting tension, right? So there's unnecessary tension reaching for things. And so I really took a good look at my setup. It was always okay, but I really took a look at my setup and realized, okay, look, the drumstick is an extension of my arm. So, I don't want to have to move my wrist or my arm to get to something, right? And that was even something as simple as moving my hi-hat to where my feet were parallel. A lot of people, if you look from a bird's eye view, you have your kick pedal here and most people's hi-hats are like this if you take an aerial shot, right? So it's like I always make the comment to students when I'm teaching, I'm like, well, when you eat dinner, do you eat like this? No, you eat straight, right? So you want to be centered. So it was just, I sort of adjusted that. I adjusted the height of my cymbals. I got rid of, the rack tom and the two rack toms. If I want one, I put it on a double tom stand. So I still maintain that sort of 4-piece as my center.
Yeah.
So my right cymbal's here. So again, my arm, the stick, I don't have to move anything. Cymbals are within reach. My floor toms, everything is really easily accessible. And I think that, having that setup will physically help. But you look at Louis Bellson. He was, in his, I think he was 80, upper 70s, early 80s. I can't remember when he passed away, but it was about a couple years after our wedding. Because he was actually at our wedding. And I got to do a double drum thing with him at Cal State Hayward, and that was amazing, playing with a legend. And he was killing it.
Yeah.
And he was in his 70s. So I just think, it's possible, to have a sustainable career, but you got to take care of yourself. And I, with all the traveling I do, I really make sure that I, physically fit, that, I take care of myself as best I could and can. I try to exercise as much as I can. And, I don't do anything extraneous that's going to hurt my wrist. Like I stopped lifting, when I was in grad school. Like it was sort of starting to kind of affect how I felt.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll do other things. I do push-ups. I'll do stuff with like strength bands and things like that, but nothing where I have to put my wrist in a funky position. When I do push-ups, I have one of those push-ups, the push-up bars.
Right.
My wrist
Yeah.
stays straight. So you're still building strength, because we all know when you're in your, I'm going to be 47 in March. So we all know when you're in our 40s, the muscle mass starts to decline. And, you still need muscle to function. So I just think if you take care of yourself and set up, and it's fun to experiment with setup because you play differently when things are set up a little bit differently. So, I really feel like that's something that people can sort of, look at. I always tell people, especially young students, if they have their toms kind of pitched like this, I'm like, well, you've got to do this to get to your tom, and you shouldn't have to work that hard. So try to find your zone of being comfortable and move it up or down. Because sometimes you may have a tom that's super deep. Like sometimes on the road, I'll get something that's, even though I try to put it in my rider, that I don't want anything more than 8 inches deep. But sometimes it's 10 inches deep. So then I've got to move my zone up a little bit, right? But I know everything is still there. And anyway, that's to me, that's a good sure way of making sure that you're going to have a sustainable career. Is the setup is so.
And I imagine rest becomes super important too as you get older, especially.
Yeah. And the traveling, kicks your butt, because a lot of times I'm flying out on a Friday, rehearsal concert Saturday, and I'm home Sunday. So sometimes I'll have a double or a triple performance in one area, maybe once or twice a year. We'll do 2 concerts or 3 concerts in one area, but most of the time it's one-offs. So on the weekend, that's kind of how it is. And so, and when I go to Japan, I'm there for one concert. So I fly out. That's a whole, it's basically a 20 some odd hour trip when you calculate everything. Yeah. And then, we have a rehearsal or 2, and then there's the concert, and then I'm home again. I mean, it's hard on the body, but you're right. Rest and diet is important. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love to eat, and I'm not the best at the diet, but
who is? I mean, it's so hard. It is.
But it's just important to eat well and at least eat stuff in moderation and balance. So, because I got a sweet tooth, and
I want to. Well, we got you for a couple minutes there. I wanted to ask you, one of the things I'm always trying to figure out as a non-drummer. Well, one is always pocket, and I think I can hear it, but I cannot describe it. But I want to save that one. Drummers like Ringo or Charlie Watts or Larry Mullen, they sort of, I don't know. People either love them or hate them. They don't do time right. They kind of. What is it about that? But clearly they're successful. You can't have more unique drum parts than Larry Mullen has. It just stands out, but he doesn't come at it at a traditional way. What makes those guys successful? Why does it work when a guy like Larry Mullen, was at one point just self-taught, he's changed all that now, but why does that work for those guys in a way that makes people just fall over themselves? Because you don't see Charlie Watts do anything. It's like he's like just on like a lazy river.
Yeah. Well,
hanging out.
Those guys have a sound, right? So, and a lot of the groups that they are with, like Ringo and so on and so forth, there's a certain sound that worked for the group. So I think that's part of it. Their approach to the music is also part of it, whether it's unorthodox or not. And I think that's something that and a lot of it too, look, just like anything, it's all about timing, right? So if you're in the right place at the right time, you may get an opportunity. And so I'm sure there's some of that plays into effect with people's career paths, just like, with me. Had I not gone to Hayward, I wouldn't have gotten that audition, so on and so forth. So, there's a little bit of the elements of being at the right place at the right time, and there's also just the elements of just the sound, the way they approach the music worked for that particular group, and the group wouldn't sound the same, right? So if you take Neil Peart out of Rush would sound completely different. And so some people love his playing and some people don't like his playing, but you can bet all your dollars that Rush wouldn't be the same without him.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you like him or not. That guy made a lot of money playing drums and did it his own way. I mean, it's hard to be more successful than that. Oh man. Hey, listen, I've had you for an hour, but I didn't give you a chance to ask me any questions. Do you have any questions for me at all, or you want to just wrap this thing up?
Oh boy. Well, how did you get in the whole podcast thing? Like what prompted that?
John and I had a community radio show. I've done a lot of time in combat zones. And so I came back and I wanted to tell stories and everything. And so I came on his show and he said, come back. And I'm like, I'll be back tomorrow. Like I just never left. And so it grew from there. And because John was a drummer, we focused a lot on drummers. And so that became, and I'm a musical person. I'm probably a failed musician to just, like your brother, I had a lot of opportunities to do a lot of things, and music just could never quite win. But, I play the guitar a little bit, and I play the harmonica a little bit, but I know a lot about music in general across a lot of genres. So it was an opportunity to meet these people that do these things that we love. And it's been such a treasure. I mean, talking to you or talking to Slim Jim Phantom, from the Stray Cats. I mean, you hear these incredible stories from people that, you wouldn't otherwise meet. Like if someone writes a great book, I just get to email them and say, hey, would you come on the show? I love your book. I mean, how incredible is it to have the author come on your show and have these conversations? So
absolutely,
it's such a blessing. I love it.
So are you in LA now? Is that where you live?
Orange County.
Orange County. Okay. Yeah. Cause I know we tried to hook up. So what brought you down there?
This is the major leagues for this kind of stuff. I needed to be down here to be near where all of the, and then I'm looking at all the talent. I mean, you don't live anywhere near here and you come through here once or, every other year, something like that in regular times,
Right.
So you can encounter a lot of people by just being here. And, and then also I want to try to grow the business into supporting more like Amazon or, other media, and bring podcast in and kind of attach it on as an additional thing. Cause people can't get enough of like I've watched all 10 episodes of The Crown. I want more. Well, you could do more with the podcast,
Yeah. I know. And there's been, I've wrestled with the fact of maybe moving back out, especially to LA, because of the opportunities that I had, like I said, doing some studio work and films just till today that I'll fly out and do that. It's just, with the kids and their school that they're in, and cost of living is, that's a lot to contend with.
You need to work a lot harder or charge a lot more.
Yeah, I know. And
there's something to be said. I mean, there's a lot of musicians that are like, I did LA and I'd rather live in Nashville or whatever, right? They'd rather live somewhere else because they can still go do LA, but they don't have to live there.
Right. And that's how I kind of make the joke. I'm like, well, it would take me, if I lived outside of LA and had to drive, it's almost the same as me just jumping on a plane and getting the same amount of time. And since I live in the airplane, I usually fly about 130,000 miles a year. Not now. I haven't been on a plane since February, but what's another flight, right? That's the way I see it. What's another flight?
And legitimately, I've left an interview at like say 2:00 in the Valley and had to go to Orange County. I could fly halfway, if not 2/3 of the way across the nation in that time. I mean, it's literally taken me 3 hours to go 35 miles.
Yeah.
I
know.
It's stupid. So, hey, well, listen, I appreciate it. I love it. I want you to come back and do more.
Yeah, anytime, man. This was really great, and I appreciate you all having me on, and it's great to have the the Benicia, the Bay Area connection. That's something that's that's pretty special. So thanks again for having me on.
All right, stand by. Hold on.